Well, hello, everyone. Good to see you all coming in to today's webinar with Jimmy Stef. And our topic is dynamics of the internationalisation of higher education with a focus on the training and making of elites in Singapore and Malaysia, so Southeast Asia. I'll introduce Jimmy in a minute. Let me take you through the webinar protocols first. Now, remember that the webinar is recorded. And once we have our communications officer back next week, we'll be posting it on YouTube, and you'll be able to reach it through our website and also directly into our YouTube channel. Now, during the webinar, we advise you to stay muted because extraneous noise can disrupt the webinar for everyone else. But of course, we advise you to turn on your microphone when you come into the Q&A part of our discussion. We advise you to use speaker view. That red arrow in the top right-hand corner there tells you where it is, because then you can see who's talking at any given time during the webinar. Now, to join the discussion, use the chat. Post your question, your statement for the Q&A segment in the chat, and then I'll be able to select you into the webinar on the basis of what's coming forward there. Normally, if you come forward fairly early, soon after the speaker's finished, or even before that, you'll be selected into the Q&A. If you come in late, like in the last 5-10 minutes, we might have a full speaking list by then, and you could miss out. So come in early, come in often, but come in early. Now, when we call you in, and I'll send you a note in the chat beforehand, we advise you to turn on your mic, of course, turn on your camera if you can, and then tell us who you are and where you are from, and then produce your question or your statement. Now, let me introduce Jimmy to you. First time on the CG webinar circuit. He's got a doctorate in sociology, and he's a postdoctoral fellow at Université Côte in France. His PhD thesis was funded by the CNRS in France, and focuses on higher education and the phenomenon of the internationalisation of higher education in Europe and Southeast Asia. And today we're going to hear about the Southeast Asian part of his research. Jimmy, over to you.
Thank you so much. So before starting my presentation, I would like to thank Simon for inviting me to present my research at this webinar. I'm deeply honored to be here with you. So like you said, I'm Jimmy Stef. I'm a PhD in sociology. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Côte d'Azur in Nice. So I apologize in advance for not being a native English speaker. So I'm sorry if my pronunciation is not accurate at time and for any language mistakes. So I can share my screen now.
And we can see that, Jimmy. That's good.
Okay, thank you. So I will present to you the general findings of my PhD thesis in sociology. I won't be able to go into the details of each country, but we can discuss that later with the discussion. So my research focuses on the challenges of internationalization in higher education in Southeast Asia, especially in Singapore and Malaysia. So as the emerging global hubs for elite education, this research aims to examine the impact of internationalization dynamics on the higher education system in the two countries over the past 60 years. So today we will focus on the strengthening of state strategies and the attractiveness of international students in Singapore and Malaysia. So the choice of these two countries, both formerly colonized by the British Empire, was particularly relevant as it allowed me to study two attractive poles of higher education for international students in Asia. So these countries have achieved a high level of internationalization compared to other countries in the region. However, these two higher education systems differ significantly in their political models, oscillating between democracy and authoritarianism, as well as in their educational offering and the production of the student elites. So, for my thesis take the sociological, socio-historical approach is adopted in my research, enable me to reconstruct and understand the genesis and long-term social processes that have characterized higher education in Singapore and Malaysia since 1949, the year of the establishment of the first university in Singapore and the Federation of Malaysia, the University Malaya. It is worth noting that the federation was subsequently divided during the independence processes, leading to the emergence of Singapore as a separate nation in 1965 and the establishment of the University of Singapore in Singapore and the University Malaya in Malaysia. So these two universities have retained the characteristic of elite institution as they were convincing during British colonization, but they have become the core of elite formation in their respective post-colonial nation following distinct national models. So Singapore has pursued its goal to representing an internationally renowned model of higher education based on the selective social inclusion of talented individuals. And the other hand, Malaysia has sought to create an hybrid oriental university model built on ethnic differentiation between Malay and non-Malay elites. So the socio-historical analysis has allowed to a better understanding of the processes through which internationalization has shaped in the higher education configuration in both countries. While a certain analogy of relationship have been identified between the two higher education systems, this system remains still due to their national context. So it is important to understand that Singaporean and Malaysian university and their quest for legitimacy have followed a market-oriented framework symbolized by the Anglo-American managerial model, while incorporating alternative scripts to reflect their national specificities. So according to the works in France of Christine Musselin and also in Simon Marginson have demonstrated that internationalization in higher education is both a vector of universality and hegemony, imposing a westernized vision of higher education in the 21st centuries. However, it's remained a heterogeneous and diversified process shaped by national context and university systems. So the research methodology of my research, I would like to say that conducting research on internationalization and more globally on higher education is a challenging field. In my case, obtaining official research authorization was complicated due to administrative issue and so on. But my field research took place over 15 months between 2019 and 2020, before the pandemic. So, moreover, investigating the ruling elites and programmatic actors is a sensitive area due to the implication for national and global higher education development. The research process was more akin to constant improvisation, balancing methodological imperatives and reality of the fields. In spite of these issues, my research was based on mixed methods, combining qualitative data like semi-structured interviews, narrative interviews, archives, observation, and so on, and also quantitative data, a questionnaire survey, secondary data analysis, and so on. So the analysis of these collected materials followed an inductive approach, which involved a constant back and forth between empirical findings and theory. So by utilizing the collecting materials, I gradually developed an exploratory analytical framework that foreshadowed a typology of higher education internationalization processes. This framework aimed to capture both the reconfiguration of educational programs and the mechanism of elite production. Additionally, it sought to be applicable to other higher education systems worldwide and as an experimental approach. This ideal typical analytical framework takes into a consideration an initial empirical observation identified both in my research field and in earlier works. In this case, it was inspired by the works of two Chinese professor, Chen Hu and Guangza in China and also in Canada. So according to these authors, so their typology is based on two dynamics. Their name inward-oriented higher education internationalization and outward-oriented higher education internationalization. So their classification is built on these two dynamics, inward and outward, and the articulation of the concept of transcultural diffusion of innovation. So they focus on the diffusion of knowledge, culture, models, and norm in higher education rather than the mobility of individuals, resources, or higher education providers, or the interaction between national higher education systems. So in 2021, Chen Hu expanded this initial typology by incorporating other concepts and theories, such as the world system theory, soft power and knowledge diplomacy, confusion philosophy, and transcultural diffusion of innovation. This deeper exploration into the dynamics of higher education internationalization and the diffusion of innovation, particularly in the relation to China's current situation as well as other countries worldwide. So the analytical framework developed in my research, so it's the figure you see at the screen, demonstrate that internationalization is broadly constructed through two dynamics, like Chen Wu. So, and inward-oriented internationalization that involve inward strategies to import knowledge, culture, and so on, to enhance national identity. So, one is an outward-oriented internationalization, outward strategies. So it's aimed to attracting academically talented international students and securing a prominent position in the global education market, which involve export strategies. And the third dynamics observed in my research field combine these two dynamics involving reputation strategy, cooperation strategy between institutions, and structuring or restructuring of educational programs, of course. And this analytical framework also takes into account migratory dynamics as well as the strategy related to the renewal of national and international elite production. These strategies include retention strategies for national elite oriented inward, often through a state scholarship for studying abroad. Also, we have attraction or repulsion strategies for international elites oriented outward, as well as a strategy of concealment, such as the unspoken duality among ethnic, social, academic elites, and so on. So using this analytical framework allow for analyzing the dynamic of higher education internationalization in the two study states. So now I very briefly present the main research finding. So let's first focus on the case of Singapore. So the city-states are as follow two major trends. So the transformation of its national public university in world-class universities and the stratification of its private educational offering. So Singaporean public university have been at the forefront of higher education structuring since 1949. However, this supremacy was institutionalized in 1979 with the Go-Kensui report, which introduced the principle of excellence and criticized in the same time the democratization of higher education in many Western countries. This explains why Singapore chose to promote excellence and elitism as a model for its national education. This model drew inspiration from both Western and Eastern worlds, allowing Singaporean higher education to occupy a dominant position regionally and become an outsider hub in the world. So the public educational offering are based on the complementarity between the two most prestigious national university, National University of Singapore and the Nanyang Technological University, which educate the future elite of the nation, and the four other major universities. It's considered as niches of excellence for educating other highly talented domestic students. So starting in the mid 19th, private educational offering in Singapore became stratified with internationally relocated first-class institution recognized worldwide, primarily educating international elite, and second-class institution recognized for their excellence within their national context. So the segmentation between public and private university is heavily dependent on state regulation, which lead to policies of exclusion, inclusion, and competition. So these policies aim to position Singaporean education among the best in the regional and international rankings. So the state regulation also drive retention policies to retain Singaporean elite, and repulsion policy to attract some international elite with higher socioeconomic capital. So rapidly, the graph that you see at the screen show a progressive decline in student mobility toward public universities since 2014, especially the black stick show the public university. So in my thesis, as revealed some limitation of Singapore internationalization model, particularly the elitism in the recruitment of domestic and international students, which remain highly unequal and rely a strong social reproduction. It also demonstrates how the anti-democratic ideology of state institution challenges Singapore's position in the global higher education landscape. So now for Malaysia, so it's different. So the Malaysia system is stratified around a duality of public sector represented by the major national university, primarily reserved for ethnic Malay elites, the majority population, and the private sector represented by the local and relocated semi-elite institution that accommodate non-Malay national students, particularly those from Chinese and Indian minorities, as well as international students. So the system is based on the partial or facade meritocracy that consistently favors the Malay elite educated in public universities. So in my thesis demonstrates the decisive influence of ethnicity and race inherited from colonization, which significantly structured the higher education system and the production of elites in Malaysia. So the thesis more globally revealed that Malaysia has positioned itself as a prominent regional player by developing a hybrid higher education system that crosses the Western, Asian, and Islamic world. There is a progressive convergence between internationalization and Islamization, evidenced by the emergence of Islamic university and the integration of Islamic finance mechanisms in management of public universities. So this emergent hub primarily attract international students from the global south with diverse profiles, including future Muslim elite from Islamic countries, students from war-torn or conflict-ridden countries, as well as those from the bottom billion. So the poorest countries they are perceived as a future state investment by Malaysia. So, and the last profile is a portion of Western traveling elites. Also, it's from a gray area where international students sometimes blur the lines with tourists or even clandestine worker, for example, with internship in Malaysia. So, however, for the same in Singapore, so the research highlights certain limitations of the higher education system. It's relied on ethnic segregation, which devalues minority and affirmative action policy favoring the majority group, primarily accommodated in the public sector. So this policy have been clearly evident since the 70s, as shown in the graph that I took in the SATO research. So more globally for the both case. So for according to the first grid I show before. So all higher education system internationalization strategies have definitely had an impact on configuration of programs. So each nation, Singapore, Malaysia, and so on, that embarked in the internationalization process of its higher education system has varying degrees employed strategies of importing and exporting model like curricula, institution, program, language dissemination, etc., etc. So in the case of the two countries that I analyze, the results showed that import strategies are predominant, while export strategies are still marginals. So thus, under the influence of globalization and the knowledge economy race, import strategies have materialized through national policy in the 19th and 2000s, favoring the infusion of external influences without severing strong national identity. This element, once again, tends toward an Asian model, emphasizing the preservation of strong national identity and values. So regulation and structuring strategies are also common, including the existence of a publicly supported sector by the state, enjoying a reputation for excellence and being the breeding ground for national elites with internationalization policies, primarily targeting postgraduate levels and the university research sector. So for the private sector, driven by the state intention, is encouraged by to establish itself, but it's subject to state regulation to maintain its image and not to disrupt the established hierarchical order, where public university ultimately remain the guarantors of elite production and reproduction. So the private sector is more focused on population restricted by ethnic based public policies or intense competition for admission to public university. So additionally, internationalization is predominantly focused on the undergraduate level. It's different than public sectors, creating this internationalization of this private sector, creating the image of a regional and international hub capable of accommodating massive flow of international students. So, however, so each country has its own dynamics and specificities, such as the emergence of reputational strategies for international ranking. It is interesting to note that the two states have inherently different mechanisms regarding university ranking, while Singapore pursues a purely qualitative strategy focused solely on its two major state universities, NUS and NTU. So the Malaysia strategy involves pushing both public and private universities to rank highly, particularly in the QS ranking. So here the strategy is purely quantitative. So although certain strategies for structuring and restructuring program may be shared between the two countries, internationalization affects institution and system differently. So this distinction impact the production of elite, which is divided between public elite and private elite with potentially different social backgrounds. So in Singapore, for example, the public sector hosts national elites and international students, while the private sector primarily accommodates international economic elite passing through the country. So on the other hand, so as mentioned before, so in Malaysia, so the public sector primarily integrate Malay elites called so Bumiputra elites, while the private sector is predominantly educates Bumiputra or non-Malay elites and aim to attract a majority of international students. So therefore, the structuring of program creates dualisms and social, community, and ethnic divisions specific to each country. So regarding the making of elites, the production of elites, so very quickly. So more broadly, so the reconfiguration of programs are reshaped the production of elites. So if we look the study of student mobility as revealed several state strategies included elite retention strategies. So in the two states demonstrate that their higher education system are based on opposite principles. So while Singapore has taken meritocracy to the extreme, aiming to cultivate a national elite necessary to survival, the Singaporean national through talent identification. So in Malaysia, it's quite different because they have abandoned meritocratic principles since its independence in favor of a differentialist system that creates elite corresponding to its ethnic-centric and desecularized vision of the nation. So, however, the both countries have a common point, which is that the formation of national elite is structured within top-tier public elite institution to ensure that public university remain competitive domestically. Internationalization have been a mean of retaining national elite and limiting their emigration to other foreign systems. States have implemented restrictive departure measures and also incentivizing return measures. So in contrast to retention strategies, so if we look, abstraction strategies are often more visible. So because they generate quantitative data and promote through institutional actors seeking to showcase their international conquest action. So these attraction strategies underline significant limitation and repulsion strategies related to state immigration policies. Selectivity through vices or quotas differ from state to state and translate into specific public policies aims at restricting incoming flow from certain countries. In some cases, quotas that limit university enrollment or specific academic levels aims, contradictory to restrict the number of international students to be accommodated. So in some that's good. Okay. So just to finish, so the final strategies I've identified in the research in the research is concerning concealment, so which is an integral part of state mechanisms. So the internationalization process is not exempt from this. So in Singapore and Malaysia, concealment take various forms and involve information and data. There are not disseminated, but this data exists. So concealment makes it difficult to understand the entirety of the social phenomenon affected by the internationalization of higher education. So in general, this strategy aims to conceal social, ethnic, religious, and educational inequality. However, the two countries do not conceal their information for the same reason. So in Singapore, the highly meritocratic system conceals the social inequality at work within its educational system. So the selection process set aside a majority of individuals in order to retain a minority that will be consecrated as the elite, as the elite university remain reserved for the affluent social classes, revealing a strong social selection that occur through educational selection. And in Malaysia, so the continued implementation of positive discrimination policies based on ethnic selection benefit the majority Malay society. This has the effect of perpetuating a certain type of elite that dominate position of power within society. So social and ethnic inequalities reinforce communal divisions and stratify the production of Malaysian national elite. So in conclusion, by internationalizing higher education system, I expose states to greater scrutiny of elite production mechanisms, resulting in increasing concealment on production and reproduction function and social inequalities. So I stop the presentation here. So thank you so much for your attention, and I will be pleased to answer your question now. I'll stop there.
Fantastic presentation, Jimmy. I mean, I did quite a lot of work in both countries, but it's some time ago, like in the 2000s, not the 2010s, and everything you've said accords with what I saw, and but you've said it so well. And of course, that also indicates that there's a certain path dependency. Both the Singapore strategy and the Malaysian strategy have been on a historically nested pathway, as you've said, for some time. Since 1965, since the division of the University of Malaya into the two different national segments. And we've got some good questions coming through. I might ask you a couple, then I'll bring in Agang, who's from Indonesia. We've also got Glenn, who's working in Thailand. So it's interesting that Southeast Asians are focusing today on this presentation. And we've got a question also from Nadia from Cambridge, and I'll bring her in too subsequently. My question is first about ASEAN. You haven't said anything about the regional organization, which probably is quite significant. That shows that it's not playing a major role in internationalization strategy in either country. It's more specifically nationally shaped and in relation to the global situation in the case of Singapore, especially. ASEAN is slowly gaining traction in higher education, in tertiary education. Is it having any impact yet in either country on internationalization strategy?
So can you repeat, because
the question's about ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Are the ASEAN relationships, mobility agreements, collaboration and research and so on, is that having an impact yet in Malaysia and or Singapore in internationalization orientation and strategy?
So in my for my research, so for the Asians, so it's I don't know, like I said, but it's quite difficult, because dialysis. So in the case in Singapore, so they lead the Asian strategies for the global for the for some programs or for some I don't know, to ensure student mobility and so on. So I think I think it's not like in Europe. So in ASEAN it's more I think it's more focused on state regulation and not a global and common vision on Asia. So I think I saw some name in the webinar. So I'm very impressive. So yeah, so I think so for the Asian, it's not very it's not very accurate for regulate higher education for all countries. So yeah.
My second question is about Malaysia, and you explained how the system is stratified between the public university sector, which is Bumiputra dominated and focused on looking after and preparing the national elite, and there are certain privileges associated with that, with Bumiputra and their financial support and so on. And then there's this secondary private sector, which is considered quite large, but it's definitely subordinated, and it's non-Bumiputra, Chinese and Indian families, and international students. One of the things that I picked up when I was working in Malaysia was the tension around research role, and the research funding was largely dominated by the public universities where the Bumiputra were located in larger numbers. Has a research role developed in the private sector in the last 2 decades? I mean, has there been any gain in terms of the private sector's position in that regard?
So that's for this question. So when I was in Malaysia, so I returned in July. So the public sector is predominantly focused for the Malay and researchers. So because the history of the outgoing mobility in the past, so I've shaped the public sector like that. So as we see in the private sector, so I said, so it's a duality. In fact, not very a duality, because the private sector is more stratified, because there are GLU, the government linked university in the private sector. So it's private university, but it's linked with government, or linked with company government. So, and we have a lot of some private universities, the good and famous private university with very good researcher, very good research. So and we have a lot of kind of small or middle university in the panorama. So I think so the dualism in Malaysia is not a form of dualism. It's maybe I don't know. It's more complex that I think.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Let me now bring in Agung Nugroho, who's I think now back in Indonesia. Agung, how's your camera working today? Can we see you, or are you just going to go onto the audio?
Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for this opportunity again. I mean, I wish I could provide my camera, but unfortunately, again, I mean, every time I turn on, there's a struggle in the connection. It makes it a little bit like some delays and the like, and I was not expecting that to happen. So, and thank you, Jimmy, for your insightful presentations. I remember, Simon, we had a presentation webinar on Tuesday related to the internationalization in the Philippine context. And today we have the Singaporean and Malaysians, which honestly add the complexity of my understanding regarding the internationalization. And Jimmy, if you don't mind, I would like to switch my questions into more methodological. So methodology, basically. I see that you are employing a mixed method in your research approach, and I learned that one of your participants would be the elites politic or something, political elites or something. I was just wondering, did you also involve by any chance? Did you interview academics in both countries? Because I would assume that academics working at the university would be one of the most suitable people to provide their insight, their descriptions, or their understanding on internationalization in both countries. So sorry, this is a methodological questions, because I remember the reason why I chose my participants, because there was some underlying reason in order to get the most meaningful data, as asked by my supervisor. Simon, you might know him. So my supervisor when I was in doctoral degree was Richard Watermeyer, so Professor Richard Watermeyer. So he asked me similar questions. Like, I chose some of the stakeholders in Indonesia, and he asked me to clarify, why did you choose these particular stakeholders instead of other stakeholders? Because other stakeholders might have been able to give you more insightful understanding of internationalization in the Indonesian context. And this is what I would like to ask Jimmy. That's my first question. And second questions would be something related to the content of your research, Jimmy, if you don't mind. I was just wondering if there is a stratification between international elites and locals in both countries. I mean, do they make any, if possible, make some problematic situations? Like, I would just like to mention that in Indonesia, we have similar situations where, for instance, when universities employ international scholars, they will be given, for example, a much higher salary than the local people, although both locals and international scholars, they graduated from overseas universities, in this case from UK, for instance, or from Australia. But because their nationalities are from, for example, Western countries, they got much better salary. So this was create like dilemma in terms of the existence of one example of stratification. So do you have any understanding of the problematic situations between the academics in both countries, Jimmy? Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Agung. So thank you. So for your first question. Regarding to the methodology. So why this stakeholder? Why? So it's so from regarding to the theoretical not theory of elites in sociology. So like Anthony Giddens and so on. So the focus, the specific look on elite production, and especially elite makers. So in this case, in my case, so I chose some president of universities, vice president, vice chancellor, so director of international relationships. Some of in the top management. So for academics. So in my case, so I saw them like resources to understand more deeply how to work the system of higher education and the internationalization of higher education in the both country. So they are more like resource persons for me. It's for that it's not very integrated in my research. So it's for this. They are inside, but not like the elite makers. So for the second question, so as you say, so it's hard to respond, because in Indonesia is the same in Malaysia or in Singapore. So the global education market, especially for the researcher and academics, it's I don't know how I can say, but it's not very fair. So because it's work, because the some factors built this phenomenon. I think so. I think this question is a question for make a specific research. So I can't very answer to this question as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Jimmy. We've got another 4 questions, and I'm going to bring them in groups of 2, so we can get through them all, hopefully, by the end of the webinar. So first, I'm going to invite Glenn Chatelier and then Nadia Tantawi, and so you'll get 2 questions to answer, Jimmy. So Glenn, you're first. Try and keep it brief if you can. We're running out of time.
Sure. Thank you, Simon. Jimmy, I commend your research work. It seems to me that while you outlined the characteristics of the national agendas in both your cases of Singapore and Malaysia, I saw very little in terms of the agendas towards innovation in education. And I understand that maybe you were kind of controlled in that approach because you spoke to political elite and the semi-elitists or whatever. But I mean, I saw very little of innovation really coming out of both your case analyses. Would you agree with my understanding, or if you argue there is innovation, can you just share with us a couple of the characteristics of HEI, higher education institution innovations? Thanks, Jimmy.
Hold it, Jimmy. Let's bring in Nadia as well. Nadia.
Okay.
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you for your insightful presentation. If you don't mind, can you please clarify what you meant by elite and semi-elite in both the Singaporean and Malaysian context? Thank you.
Hey,
So
Jimmy.
yeah, so for Niger, so I respond to Glenn after. So elite and it's semi-elite for the institution. So it's the clarification. It's in the Ferry research. So I don't remember the author of. I don't have in my computer now. It's like the hierarchical order in the institution. It's not for individual, but just institution. So the top rank university, and I know in Malaysia especially. So if we take the public sector or the private sector, so the hierarchical is the same, because the public and the private, so the organization is the same. So for private, it's some elite and semi-elite institution. So regarding to semi-elite institution in the very literature is some offshore institution like I don't remember. So it's Nottingham University and so on. So they're called the semi-elite institution in the literature education. And also in the Singapore, so it's the same, because so they are tend to attract some top university in Singapore, but they are sometimes they are failed. So for some reason, so and sometimes they are it will be good for them. So I think semi-elite institution in Singapore, like I don't know if ESSEC Asia Pacific, for example, so is the best French business school, but in fact in the world, so the name is not so accurate. So then I don't know, Harvard University, so some university like that. So it's the hierarchical order. So for the Glenn question, so it's quite innovation. You talk about innovation in higher education, international higher education. So I think so regarding like you have said. So it's very interesting. So I think so what do you call about innovation? So what do you think about innovation? Can you please tell your answer?
Okay, in terms of new approaches towards research itself, number one could be an innovative approach, or in the findings of experimentations that might lead to an innovative adoption. We see that more in Southeast Asia with the entrepreneurial efforts, and I grant you that they come more out of the private higher educations, which are not exactly elitist, but whatever. I mean, that's debatable, and that's what I'm implying. We see a kind of recycling of the adoptions of the East and West just to be politically correct and not to disturb the apple cart, so to speak. Okay, and I was just wondering if your study pointed you in any direction of what you might call innovative approaches.
No, not yet, in fact. So I think it's a good question on innovation. So I think so, yeah. So not in fact.
I'm going to move now to Inviva Gisa, who's got the next question, and then I'll bring in one more after that.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. I have one question in the sense that I think Jimmy has very correctly identified meritocracy or merit-based approach in Singapore and the race-based or ethnicity-based approach in Malaysia. I have worked in both the countries. I agree broadly with that. But my question is that to substantiate this in research, you should link this with the regulatory authorities and regulatory processes that are taking place. And I did not find that dimension in your presentation. So what I mean to say is that institutions are responding, although they are autonomous, they are responding to national policies related to this. And as your chart very clearly showed how the share of Movimutras increased for a period of time, and how the share of Chinese and Indians declined in enrollment, etc. These are also part of the change that has taken place after 1969 student revolt that took place. And as a result of that, there was a change in the policy in terms of the quota system that has taken place. Similarly, in the context of internationalization also, I know that there are certain rules, regulations of the central government or the federal government that is influencing the institutions. I'll be very happy if you highlight some aspects of these national strategies whereby this distinction that you are making between merit-based and ethnic race and racial-based, is satisfied.
Yeah.
And just before you respond, Jimmy, we do have one more question, which Mutier Ainimarat has asked me to, speak because doesn't have access to Mutier doesn't have microphone access. And the question is about the ultra-meritocratic term, the term ultra-meritocratic that you used in relation to Singapore. Mutier wants to know what the criteria are for determining ultra-meritocratic approach.
So for the both questions, so the question of meritocratic, so or ultra meritocratic in the case of Singapore. So in fact in Malaysia, so I talk on a partial meritocratic. It's quite so they are meritocratic, but not like we think in Western countries. So the meritocracy, so it's more I don't know. So you have talk about the regulation states, and in the case for Singapore, we know some researcher, and so we don't have the social backgrounds of domestic student, national students, but when we go to Singapore and we talk with academics and experts on higher education, and when we go to make some survey questionnaires, so in my case, so in the case in Singapore, so I wanted to get some information of national student. It was not possible because the social economic capital in Singapore, it's forbidden to access, to ask some student. So it's like that. So we don't have any data on social background, in fact. So for the parents and for the student is the same, because the Singaporean so in fact the meritocratic is also linked with the way we think the social inequalities. So to think social inequality. So I think so. In the case in Malaysia, so like you said, so the meritocracy, it's like in a balance. So sometimes it is meritocratic because so they respond to a social injustice. So I think about Bumiputra. So finally some word of government word, and the speeches of government is focused on social justice and focus on especially on a type of ethnic community, but so it creates so I said so the quotas in a university, public university. So they are close to put them in the pre-university system. So they are always, I don't know, like I said, so it's always to connect with social inequalities with all. In the case in Singapore is for capital background, especially capital background, and in Malaysia is more focused on ethnic background. So I think it's the difference.
Yeah, and that accords with my observations too. I mean, I think that what's happened in Malaysia is that is also a post-colonial aspect to this. You know, that the Bumiputra has replaced the British Raj, you know, in Malaysia as the ruling caste, and but maintain the subordination of the Chinese and Indian populations that were, to some extent, brought in by the colonial master, you know, as to perform certain labor functions within the colony, especially in the case of Indian workers. So you have this reproduction of the old colonial elite, but with the post-colonial in charge. So quite a complicated problem. If someone is extraneously intervening, I'm going to close the webinar and thank you all for attending. And just simply mention that next Tuesday, we are looking at Russian universities and what's happened to them before and after the war began last February. And our speaker will be Maria Yukovic. Many people will know about her work. She's just published, or last year published, a book on the history of Russian universities, post-Soviet period. So look forward to seeing you then. I apologize for this noise. I can't track it. I can't turn it off. And Jimmy, thank you again. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Simon.
Great webinar.
Thank you.
And bye to everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.